Sophia had always been a kind-hearted and humble girl. She grew up in a warm and loving home, adored by her father, Mr. Anderson, and her mother, who showered her with care. However, life took a cruel turn when Sophia's mother passed away unexpectedly. The once joyful home became silent, filled with the absence of the woman who had been its heart. Mr. Anderson, struggling to raise Sophia alone, eventually remarried a woman named Victoria. With her came Isabella, Victoria's daughter from a previous marriage. Sophia, despite her grief, was excited about having a new family. She dreamed of sisterly love, of sharing secrets and laughter with Isabella. She welcomed them both with open arms, hopeful that their home would once again be filled with warmth and happiness. But from the very beginning, things did not go as she had imagined. Victoria was not the kind and nurturing stepmother Sophia had hoped for. She was distant, cold, and showed little affection toward her. Isabella, instead of embracing Sophia as a sister, treated her like an outsider. She would sneer at her kindness, roll her eyes at her attempts to bond, and whisper cruel remarks under her breath when their father wasn't around. At first, Sophia tried to ignore the cold stares and harsh words, believing that with time, they would all grow close. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and nothing changed. If anything, things became worse. Victoria and Isabella made it clear. She was not one of them. Mr. Anderson, blinded by his love for his new wife, failed to notice the shift in the household. In his presence, Victoria pretended to be kind. Isabella forced a smile, and Sophia kept her pain hidden. She didn't want to burden her father, so she endured the quiet rejection in silence, hoping that one day they would accept her. But deep down, she was beginning to realize she had lost more than just her mother. She had lost her place in her own home. Sophia had always longed for a sister, someone to share secrets with, someone who would understand her in a way no one else could. When Isabella moved in, she was filled with hope, believing that they would become the best of friends. She did everything to make her new stepsister feel welcome, offering to share her books, showing her around the house, and even letting her borrow her favorite dresses. But Isabella never seemed interested. Instead of gratitude, she responded with cold stares and dismissive remarks. At first, Sophia thought Isabella just needed time to adjust. Maybe she was shy or nervous about living in a new home. But it soon became clear that Isabella wasn't hesitant. She was resentful. Whenever their father praised Sophia for anything, Isabella's expression darkened. If Sophia excelled in school, Isabella would roll her eyes. It wasn't long before she began making passive-aggressive comments, belittling Sophia at every opportunity. Victoria, on the other hand, didn't even bother hiding her favoritism. From the moment she stepped into the house, she treated Isabella like a princess. She bought her new clothes, jewelry, and anything she asked for. Sophia, however, was treated like an afterthought, or worse, like a servant. "Sophia, fetch me some tea," Victoria would demand as she lounged on the couch with Isabella. "Sophia, clean up the mess in the kitchen. Isabella is too tired." "Sophia, don't just stand there. Sweep the floor properly." It didn't take long for Sophia to realize that she was no longer seen as the daughter of the house, but rather as the maid. Every morning before school, she had to clean the house, wash the dishes, and prepare breakfast for everyone. While Isabella slept in and took her time getting ready, Sophia was running around, making sure everything was in place. Even after returning from school, while Isabella watched television or chatted on the phone, Sophia was ordered to do chores. Mr. Anderson remained blissfully unaware of everything. He was a hard-working man, often leaving for work early in the morning and returning late at night. Whenever he was home, Victoria made sure to put on an act, pretending to care for Sophia just enough to avoid suspicion. She would offer her fake smiles and gentle words, ensuring that Mr. Anderson never questioned anything. Isabella, too, played her role well. She had a talent for manipulating situations in her favor, always making sure Sophia got blamed for things she hadn't done. If a glass broke, Isabella would say, Sophia was being careless again. If something went missing, I saw Sophia with it last. And if Sophia ever tried to stand up for herself, Isabella would burst into fake tears, pretending that Sophia had been rude or unkind to her. One evening, when Mr. Anderson was home, Isabella deliberately spilled juice on the expensive carpet in the living room. Before Sophia could react, Isabella gasped loudly and shouted, "Sophia! How could you be so clumsy?" Mr. Anderson turned toward them, his face filled with disappointment. "Sophia, you need to be more careful," he said sternly. "But I—" Sophia started to protest, but Victoria cut her off. "It's okay, dear," Victoria said, shaking her head as if Sophia had exhausted her patience. She didn't mean to, but Sophia, you really need to be more responsible. Sophia felt her throat tighten. No matter what she did, no matter how hard she tried to be good, she was always the one at fault. Over time, the unfairness of it all started to weigh on her. She found herself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering why things had turned out this way. She had been so excited to have a sister, to have a family again. But instead of love and warmth, she found herself trapped in a home that no longer felt like hers. And deep down, she knew things were only going to get worse. Mr. Anderson had always been a strong and resilient man, the pillar of Sophia's life. No matter how difficult things got, she always found comfort in the fact that he was there for her. But fate had other plans. One evening, after returning from work, Mr. Anderson complained of feeling weak and dizzy. Sophia noticed that he had been looking more exhausted than usual, his once lively eyes now dull with fatigue. At first, he dismissed it as mere exhaustion, assuring Sophia that he just needed some rest. But as days passed, his condition worsened. He grew frail, his once sturdy frame now reduced to weakness. Concerned, Sophia pleaded with him to see a doctor, and after much persuasion, he agreed. The diagnosis was devastating. Mr. Anderson had a terminal illness, and his time was limited. Sophia was heartbroken. The only parent she had left was slipping away, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Victoria, however, reacted differently. While she put on a facade of concern, her eyes gleamed with something else, something darker. With Mr. Anderson bedridden, she took control of everything in the house. She limited Sophia's access to her father, claiming that he needed peace and rest. The once warm home became even colder, and Sophia could do nothing but watch helplessly as her father's health declined. She spent every moment she could by his side, holding his hand, whispering prayers, and telling him how much she loved him. And then, one fateful night, he was gone. Mr. Anderson's passing shattered Sophia's world. She felt like a part of her soul had been ripped away. But while she mourned, Victoria and Isabella seemed almost relieved. There were no real tears from them, no genuine sorrow. Instead, Victoria took charge of all the funeral arrangements, ensuring that she appeared to be the grieving widow in the eyes of society. Once the funeral was over, Sophia expected some sense of normalcy, but she was about to face a nightmare she never imagined. One afternoon, Victoria called Sophia into the study. With a kind smile, a smile that never quite reached her eyes, she placed a set of documents in front of her. "Sophia, dear," Victoria said, her voice deceptively gentle. "Your father left some legal paperwork behind. I need you to sign these so we can finalize everything." Still grieving and trusting that her stepmother was handling things appropriately, Sophia barely glanced at the documents before signing them. What she didn't realize was that she had just signed away everything: her father's house, his bank accounts, and every asset he had ever owned. The entire inheritance now legally belonged to Isabella. It wasn't until days later that she understood what had happened. She overheard a conversation between Victoria and a lawyer, discussing how the house and all financial assets were now officially in Isabella's name. A sinking feeling settled in Sophia's stomach. She confronted Victoria, her voice trembling with disbelief. "What have you done?" she asked. Victoria's expression was one of mock surprise. "Done," "Oh, Sophia, don't be dramatic. You signed the papers yourself." "But you tricked me. That money belonged to my father. It was meant for both of us." Victoria sighed and exchanged a glance with Isabella, who smirked from her seat on the couch. "That's where you're wrong," Victoria said smoothly. "Everything belongs to Isabella now. And as for you," she tilted her head, eyes gleaming with cruelty, "well, you have no legal claim to anything. You're just here." The realization hit Sophia like a storm. She had nothing. No home, no money, no support. Everything her father had worked for was now in Isabella's hands, and she was nothing more than an unwanted guest in her own house. The mistreatment worsened. Now that Victoria and Isabella no longer had to pretend, they stopped holding back their cruelty. "Sophia, do the laundry," Isabella ordered one morning. "Sophia, scrub the floors," Victoria added casually. Sophia, once the beloved daughter of the house, was now reduced to a maid. She was forced to clean, cook, and serve them like a servant. If she dared to resist, she was met with mockery and threats. "You should be grateful we even let you stay here," Isabella sneered one evening. "After all, this is my house now." Sophia wanted to fight back, to demand justice, but she had no one on her side. The few friends her father had were unaware of what had happened, and the legal system had already sealed her fate with the documents she had unknowingly signed. Days turned into weeks, and Sophia's life became a living nightmare. While Isabella enjoyed the lavish lifestyle that her father's wealth provided, going on shopping sprees, attending parties and traveling, Sophia was left behind, scrubbing floors and washing dishes. She spent nights crying herself to sleep, wondering how things had come to this. Her father had promised to protect her, but now he was gone, and she had no one. The people who were supposed to be her family had stolen everything from her, leaving her with nothing but despair. One evening, as she stood in the kitchen washing dishes, Sophia stared at her reflection in the window. She hardly recognized herself anymore. Gone was the bright-eyed girl full of hope. In her place was someone exhausted, broken and lost. But deep in her heart, something stirred. A quiet, burning determination. She had lost everything, but she was still standing. And she refused to let them break her completely. Sophia stood at the doorstep of what was once her home, shivering as the cold night air wrapped around her. A small bag with a few of her belongings was clutched in her hands. Victoria's cruel words still echoed in her ears. "You are nothing but a burden. Get out." She had pleaded, begged for a chance to stay, but Isabella had only laughed, watching with satisfaction as her mother pushed Sophia toward the door. There was no kindness left, no pretense. Now that they had stripped her of everything, they had no use for her. With nowhere to go, Sophia wandered the streets, her heart heavy with despair. The night was long, and fear gripped her as she walked through unfamiliar alleys, unsure of what to do next. She had no money, no food, and no idea where she could find shelter. Every step she took was filled with uncertainty, but she refused to break down. After hours of wandering, she remembered someone, Mrs. Thompson, an old friend of her father's. She had visited their home a few times in the past and had always been kind to Sophia. Holding on to a sliver of hope, Sophia made her way to the woman's house, praying that she would help. When Mrs. Thompson opened the door, her eyes widened in shock at the sight of the exhausted, shivering girl before her. Without hesitation, she pulled Sophia inside, wrapping her in a warm embrace. "My dear child, what happened to you?" she asked gently. Tears streamed down Sophia's face as she recounted everything: her father's death, the betrayal, and how she had been thrown out like she was nothing. Mrs. Thompson listened with a heavy heart, her eyes filled with sorrow. When Sophia finished, the woman took her hands and squeezed them firmly. "You may have lost everything, but that does not mean you are lost. You are stronger than this, Sophia. I will help you, but you must promise me one thing: never give up." Sophia nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The days that followed were not easy. Though Mrs. Thompson gave her a roof over her head, Sophia knew she could not rely on her forever. She needed to stand on her own feet. Determined not to let Victoria and Isabella's cruelty define her future, she set her mind to rebuilding her life. She started looking for work, knocking on doors, visiting shops, and asking for any job she could find. Eventually, she secured a position at a small cafe, working long shifts to earn just enough to survive. The work was exhausting, and there were days when she came home with aching feet and blistered hands, but she never complained. Mrs. Thompson saw the fire in her and encouraged her to continue her education. "You are meant for greater things, Sophia," she said one evening as they sat together after dinner. "You have a brilliant mind. Don't let your circumstances hold you back." Taking her advice to heart, Sophia enrolled in evening classes at a community school. Her days became relentless, working at the cafe from morning till late afternoon, attending classes in the evening, and studying late into the night. There were moments when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, when she felt like giving up, but she refused to let despair win. She pushed herself beyond limits she never knew she had. She studied on the bus to work, read books in between breaks, and took notes under dim cafe lights when customers weren't around. Every bit of effort she put in was a step closer to the future she dreamed of. But life was still harsh. There were days when she barely had enough to eat. Days when she felt completely alone in the world. She would see Isabella on social media, flaunting her luxurious life, and for a moment, bitterness would creep into her heart. But she quickly reminded herself that she was building something real, something that couldn't be taken away by lies and deceit. Months turned into years, and Sophia's hard work paid off. She graduated at the top of her class, her dedication recognized by her teachers. One of them encouraged her to apply for a scholarship at a prestigious university, an opportunity that could change her life forever. With trembling hands, she filled out the application, poured her heart into the essay, and submitted it with a silent prayer. The waiting period was agonizing, filled with doubt and anxiety. She had come so far, but was it enough? Then, one day, an envelope arrived in the mail. With shaky fingers, she tore it open and scanned the words inside. Congratulations. Full scholarship. Awarded. Tears spilled from her eyes as she read the letter over and over again. She had done it. Against all odds, she had done it. As she stood outside, looking up at the stars, a deep sense of pride filled her heart. She had been thrown out, humiliated, treated like she was worthless, but she had proven them wrong. This was only the beginning. Sophia was no longer a helpless girl trapped in a cruel household. She was a fighter, a survivor, and soon she would become unstoppable. Isabella had always enjoyed the finer things in life, but after gaining control of Mr. Anderson's wealth, her greed knew no bounds. She indulged in shopping sprees, throwing lavish parties, and surrounding herself with people who only cared about her riches. Every evening, she flaunted her designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and luxury vacations on social media, basking in the envy of others. Victoria, proud of her daughter's newfound status, encouraged her reckless spending. "You deserve it, my love," she would say, watching as Isabella mindlessly swiped her credit cards. "We have plenty, and it will never run out. But wealth, when mismanaged, never lasts forever." Blinded by arrogance, Isabella failed to notice how quickly the money was slipping through her fingers. The expenses piled up: extravagant parties, expensive gifts for friends who only stayed for the luxuries, and investments in businesses she knew nothing about. When her so-called friends introduced her to high-stakes gambling, she saw it as another thrilling way to display her power. At first, she won big, fueling her addiction to the game. The rush of victory made her crave more, and she started betting recklessly, convinced that her luck would never fade. But as with all gamblers, luck eventually turned against her. The losses started small, amounts she dismissed as insignificant. But as her desperation to recover what she had lost grew, so did her wages. She kept borrowing, digging herself deeper into a hole she could not escape. Victoria remained oblivious for a while, believing that Isabella had everything under control. But when debt collectors started knocking on their door, demanding payments, she realized the terrible truth. "Isabella, what have you done?" she cried, clutching a handful of overdue bills in her trembling hands. "Relax, mother," Isabella scoffed, rolling her eyes. "It's just a temporary setback. I can win it back." But no amount of confidence could undo the damage. The bank accounts were draining, the mansion's upkeep was too expensive, and creditors were no longer willing to wait. Victoria, now frantic, tried to reach out to old business associates of Mr. Anderson, hoping for a loan to salvage their situation. But no one was willing to help. The news of their financial trouble had spread, and those who once admired them began to distance themselves. Then came the day they had both feared. The sound of heavy knocking echoed through the grand mansion as a group of debt collectors arrived with legal notices. They were no longer asking for payments. They were here to take everything. "Please give us more time," Victoria begged, tears streaming down her face. The men remained unmoved. "Ma'am, you've had enough warnings. The house, the cars, everything of value. It's all being seized." Isabella watched in horror as their lavish world crumbled before her eyes. The designer furniture, the luxury cars, the expensive jewelry, all of it was taken away. The mansion that once stood as a symbol of their status was now just a hollow shell, stripped of everything that made it grand. Forced to vacate the only home they had ever known, Victoria and Isabella found themselves in a small, cramped apartment, far removed from the wealth they once flaunted. The stress was too much for Victoria. The shame, the humiliation, the loss of power. It broke her. Within weeks, she fell gravely ill, unable to afford proper medical care. Isabella, once the girl who had everything, was now struggling to afford even the most basic necessities. The friends who once surrounded her disappeared, proving that they had never cared for her, only for the money she no longer had. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to have nothing. Sophia's journey was never easy, but every hardship she endured only fueled her determination to succeed. With her scholarship, she devoted herself entirely to her studies, excelling in every subject. While others saw university as just another phase in life, she saw it as her golden opportunity, a chance to reclaim her dignity and build the life she had once dreamed of. Late nights of studying, endless assignments, and part-time jobs to support herself became her routine. She barely had time for leisure, but she didn't mind. Her sacrifices were stepping stones to a better future. Professors took notice of her dedication, and soon she became one of the most promising students in her field. Upon graduating with top honors, prestigious companies lined up to offer her positions, impressed by her intelligence and work ethic. She secured a high-paying job at a renowned firm, quickly rising through the ranks due to her commitment and innovative ideas. Despite her success, she never let arrogance or bitterness consume her. She had learned the value of humility and resilience, and she remained grateful for every opportunity. As the years passed, Sophia's ambition pushed her further. She saved diligently, invested wisely, and after gaining enough experience, she decided to launch her own business. It was a risk, but she believed in herself. She started a consulting firm, using her expertise to help struggling businesses grow. What began as a small startup soon expanded, gaining recognition in the industry. Her company flourished, and with time, she became a respected entrepreneur, known for her intelligence, honesty, and kindness. With her hard-earned wealth, Sophia finally allowed herself to enjoy the comforts she had once been denied. She purchased a luxurious house, not as a means of revenge, but as a symbol of how far she had come. Every corner of the house reflected her journey, her struggles, and her victories. As she stood on the balcony of her new home, looking at the sunset, she felt nothing but peace. She had been betrayed, abandoned, and stripped of everything, but she had risen above it all. She had built a life of dignity, happiness, and success, not through greed or cruelty, but through perseverance and integrity. Sophia had won, not by seeking revenge, but by proving that true strength lies in never giving up. One fateful afternoon, as Sophia sat in her office, reviewing documents for a new business deal, her secretary informed her that two women were waiting outside. There was hesitation in the secretary's voice, almost as if she didn't believe what she was seeing. "They say they know you," she added cautiously. Sophia's curiosity piqued, but nothing could have prepared her for what she saw when she stepped into the lobby. There, standing awkwardly near the entrance, were Isabella and Victoria. They were almost unrecognizable. Their once lavish dresses and expensive accessories were gone, replaced by faded clothes that looked worn from years of struggle. The arrogance that used to define Isabella's every move had vanished, replaced by a weary, humbled expression. Victoria, frail and visibly aged, clutched her daughter's arm for support, her once authoritative stance now replaced by fragility. For a brief moment, Sophia felt a wave of emotions, memories of betrayal, of suffering, of the nights she had spent crying alone after being thrown out. But as she looked at them now, she saw something she had never expected: defeat, regret, and most surprisingly, shame. Isabella stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sophia." She hesitated, her lips trembling. I don't deserve to ask for anything, but we have nowhere else to go." Victoria, once so proud and cruel, could not even meet Sophia's gaze. She looked down, as if the weight of her own actions had finally crushed her. "We lost everything," Isabella admitted, her eyes glistening with tears. "I was foolish, selfish, and I see that now. I hurt you. I took everything from you, and I never thought I'd have to stand in front of you like this, begging for help." Sophia studied them for a long time. If karma had truly come full circle, this was it. She had every right to turn them away, to make them feel the same pain she had endured. A part of her wondered if they truly felt remorse, or if this was just another act of desperation. But deep down, she knew she was not like them. With a deep breath, she finally spoke. "I don't forget, Isabella, and I certainly don't forget Victoria." Her voice was calm, firm. "But I also know what it feels like to have nothing, to be desperate, and I won't let myself become the kind of person who turns away from those in need, even if they once did it to me." Isabella's eyes widened, disbelief flickering across her face. Sophia continued, "I won't hand you a fortune, and I won't undo your mistakes for you. But I will help you get back on your feet." She offered them a small apartment in one of her properties, along with a chance to work and rebuild their lives. Everyone who heard about Sophia's decision was stunned. But to her, it wasn't about revenge. It was about proving that kindness and resilience always triumph over cruelty. As Sophia walked away from Isabella and Victoria that day, she felt a profound sense of closure. The pain of the past no longer weighed her down. She had spent years building herself up, not through hatred or revenge, but through sheer determination and kindness. Now, standing tall and successful, she had nothing to prove to anyone. Her success was her answer to all the cruelty she had faced. For Isabella, the lesson was bitter but necessary. She had spent her youth reveling in privilege, believing wealth and beauty made her untouchable. But in the end, her arrogance had been her downfall. She had taken everything from Sophia, never once imagining that one day she would be the one left with nothing. The realization of her own mistakes haunted her. Greed had blinded her, but now she saw the truth. Money could disappear in an instant, but character and integrity were what truly lasted. Victoria, too, had been humbled. The woman who once looked down on Sophia now depended on her for survival. Watching her daughter suffer was the ultimate punishment. one she had unknowingly set in motion through her own cruelty. She no longer had the power she once did, and for the first time, she understood the consequences of her actions. Meanwhile, Sophia moved forward, choosing to focus on her bright future rather than the ghosts of the past. She continued to grow her business, helping those who deserved a second chance. She found happiness not in wealth alone, but in the knowledge that she had risen above the hatred that once sought to destroy her. Her journey was proof that true success isn't about stepping on others. It's about lifting yourself up despite the obstacles. The moral of the story was clear. Karma always returns what you give, good or bad. Isabella and Victoria had sown cruelty, and in the end they reaped the consequences. But Sophia, who had given kindness and hard work to the world, received nothing but success and peace in return. Her story was a testament to the power of perseverance, integrity, and most of all, the strength of a kind heart.